Welcome to a new season of Leadership Live podcast, where talented people become extraordinary leaders. I'm Daphne Horowitz, and I'm here to help you cut through the noise and talk about real leadership issues. Down to earth, solid, caring and confident leadership. No theory, no pie in the sky, no frills or fluff. Because this is what the world needs most right now. For you to lead with confidence, clarity and impact, so that you can build a business that builds people, grows profit, and makes a difference. Empathy is one of the most valued characteristics of a leader, and it has never been more relevant than right now, where we're facing uncertainty and complexity at much higher levels than ever before. Today, I'm talking to Killian Hemmy, who shares his story and life-altering experiences as a leader, showing us how to find strength in vulnerability and how to lead with empathy. Have a listen as it gets real about important leadership topics like making decisions, the power of reflection, imposter syndrome, and resilience, among other topics that we covered, all critical pieces of the leadership journey. There is so much to learn from this conversation with Killian, and one of my favorite nuggets is when he said, "If people can communicate better, we can achieve almost anything." And that is definitely a principle that is close to my heart. So enjoy. And before we dive in, I do want to invite you to hop on to daphneHorowitz.com, my website, where we will be uncovering a brand new offer that will help you become extraordinary in your leadership journey to CEO. So today we have a wonderful guest with us. I am so excited to have you on the show, Killian. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me here.
I have so much to ask you about, but I'm going to give a quick intro. And I can't even cover all of it because there's so much, but I'm going to pick out some of the parts that I want to say. So we've got Killian Hemmy with us. He's currently the CEO of ATSG Corporation, which grew from a small little company in, where did you say, was it? Northern Virginia? That's right. Yeah. And is now a global corporation. So that's a huge success. And the background to that is that you come from the military, a US Marine officer, FBI special agent with 6 tours in Afghanistan and various other places, and other life experiences that are just so many to mention. And I hope we can really dig into some of those today. So welcome, Killian. We want to hear your story. And I'd love to begin by asking you about that one moment that you described to me where you were actually clinically dead for an hour. Tell us about that.
You got it. So it's funny now that is what we are leading with, because I don't think I was ready to talk about it until really the last couple of years. I think I've really come to peace with it. So quick background bringing up to it is, as you mentioned, Daphne, I was in the Marines and then in the FBI. This happened during my 6th and final trip to Afghanistan. I had been, received a clean bill of health from military physicians, from government physicians. And I stayed up late one night. I was in Kabul, Afghanistan, stayed up late working on an investigation that I was working on. Woke up the next morning and made a phone call back home, and then met up with some former Australian special operations guys and went for a run and ran about a mile and a little bit of change with them. And then wasn't feeling so well. And so we got to a sort of corner of a building, and I said, guys, I'll catch you on the next lap. Go ahead without me. So they turned the corner and I took a couple more steps and just right down, face first. Wow. So the first person who saw me was a local guard. He then calls over somebody who had been a former special forces medic. A couple minutes later, the Australians come around because thankfully they were much faster at running than I was. And everybody starts working on me. My heart had just stopped. And it turns out that I had a weird genetic anomaly that nobody had previously identified. or been able to identify. And that was the day that it happened. It was September 26, 2009. So these guys worked on me for the better part of an hour.
After there in the spot where you had fallen.
Yep. So they worked on me there, and then they actually went to go and get an AED, a shock pad, and the batteries were dead. And so they grabbed me. Luckily, they were all very hardy fellows because I'm not the smallest human being myself. And they dragged me upstairs to the medical room, basically kicked the door in, and then they got everything working. And I mean, that was sort of the first stroke of serendipity or, divine intervention, dumb luck, whatever it may be, is I was surrounded by people who knew what they were doing. And then they eventually got my heart to beat again after about 12 or 13 minutes. And then they got me to breathe again after about 50 some odd minutes. So wow. Yeah, better part of an hour that I was not functioning on my own. So everything that I just told you is made up of pieces of information that various people told me, because I don't remember about 2 days before and 2 days afterwards. And
what was your awareness? When was your first awareness that this had happened?
That's a great question. So it's, again, funny stories in retrospect where...
Of course. Only in retrospect, right?
Only in retrospect. I had a pretty bushy beard at that point, and they took me to a hospital, which, the sort of collaborative environment in Afghanistan at the time, the hospital was a French hospital. So they took me to the hospital, and somebody there allowed me to trim my beard off. And so I woke up about 2 days later, and I felt around, and I didn't remember trimming off my beard. I'm like, guys, how long have I been out? And they're like, 2 days. And I'm like, oh, okay, good. I thought maybe I'd been like 6 years. And then the next thing was, I had lived in Switzerland when I was growing up a little bit. I had gone to school there. And so I spoke reasonable French, and I started speaking to the hospital staff in French, and everybody who was with me had no idea that I spoke French. And so they thought that maybe I had some, rewiring of my brain. Exactly. And, it was like that movie Phenomenon where I could now communicate with the stars or something. So yeah, that was what happened. So I was quickly, medically evacuated back home to the States via London for a few days. When I got back home, the doctors diagnosed it as this weird, kind of genetic thing, or very much genetic thing, but where it basically created this Bermuda Triangle in my heart that day, where all the beats that were supposed to be going all around my heart to keep it going were going to this one spot and disappearing. So it took them about a year to fix the problem. And in that year, it really, I kept having problems.
Was your life in danger in that year? Could your heart stop at any minute?
So it could, and it did. So when I first got back, they put a box in my chest. It's called an implantable cardioverter defibrillator, but basically it's like an AED that goes in your chest, and it'll shock you if you have troubles. Okay. A lot of people live with it. So it's similar to a pacemaker, but it only functions if you need it to. So they put this box in my chest, and they hadn't fixed the underlying problem. And so I kept having issues where like I would pass out while doing something too hot, running, getting too animated. I mean, it was tough. And that made me very much fearful of like going out and being in public. I was still doing a job and still working. But it was tough. That part really got to me, of not being able to have control of my life, because I went from a profession where I was completely in control of my life and everything around me to this sort of vulnerability where that armor that I'd built up around myself now had a weak spot in it.
Right. And you couldn't know literally what was going to happen in the next minute. That is exactly what it was. It was that sits there as well, I imagine, of, am I going to be okay today? Is this day going to get through? Am I going to get through today without an incident?
Yeah. And that was actually that was actually the moment where, and by moment I say after about a year or so. So they fixed the underlying problem a year later, 11 months later, actually. They fixed the underlying problem, and I was still borderline agoraphobic. Like, I didn't like going outside. I didn't like going for walks with my dog. I didn't like doing things like that because I was always worried, part from a being embarrassed standpoint, part from a health standpoint. Like, I didn't want to be that guy that somebody found passed out, because the thing in my chest wouldn't let anything really bad happen to me. But I also didn't want, some stranger coming up and next thing I know, I'm in an ambulance. Those things were very scary to me. What felt safe was being home.
And I can only imagine that being a person who is successful, in control, knows what they're doing, really a person of respect and authority, especially if you look at military, FBI agent, there's something of real, at least perceived strength and authority in those roles. And all of a sudden there's a chink in the armor, there's a weakness that can throw you out at any moment. And that puts you in a very vulnerable state. I can imagine that's a very difficult mindset to move into, that, something can happen. I don't have it all together. I'm not totally in control.
That's exactly right. And that was the toughest thing, because, you hit the nail on the head with, I was surrounded by really great, talented people, but they were really great, talented people who didn't understand and didn't comprehend what I was going through. And even my now wife, fiance at the time, she couldn't understand it. She understood it better than most because we had some pretty deep conversations about it. But I can sit here and I can tell you that I'm scared that I'm going to walk out my door and my heart's going to stop. And that won't convey the same way to you because you've never had that experience. And so I realized that there was, and this is, again, as we talked about before, the sort of beauty of retrospect is now I realize that my fault was that I didn't make myself clear enough. I didn't show my vulnerabilities enough to people that I probably could have built up a good group of support people around me. Yeah. I have some phenomenal friends, family, who I think could have supported a whole lot better if I would have said I need the support. Yeah. But the other
I just want to hold that thought for a moment, because I can so relate to what you're saying. It's that when you are used to being the achiever, the person who's strong, the person who's got it together, who knows what they're doing, it's very difficult to all of a sudden face that vulnerability within you and then to ask for help and to ask for support, even though the people around you really want to support and they want to know what they can do. But it's very difficult to step into those shoes of saying, okay, I need support now. This is what I need from you, whether it's understanding or empathy or whatever it is, this is what I need. That's a very difficult space to be in. And I think there's a big learning there that is probably worth just talking about a little bit more.
Absolutely. But that is the hardest thing that I think that human beings have to deal with. And I think very much so right now, that is what people are dealing with is, what are you going through in this moment right now? What are you going through during this day? What are you going through in this month? What are you going through during this entire COVID crisis that we are all dealing with? And, you would think that we've done a whole lot for mental health and for being willing to share our vulnerabilities right now, but I don't think we've done as much as we can. We are all going through the exact same thing, different shades, different flavors, depending on where we are in the world. But everybody has gone through that scare of, this is a disease that I can't see, I can't taste, I can't smell, I can't, avoid it. And there's only so much I can do to protect myself and to protect the ones that I love. And so how am I dealing with that? I think we haven't quite figured that one out yet, because there's a lot of talk that happens, and I'm, probably guilty of it myself at work, but there's a lot of talk that happens about, we're all in this together, but what does that absolutely truly mean at its basest form? And how do you convey from a leadership standpoint, how do you convey that I may not know what you're going through because you may have 3 kids who are all at home and you're trying to teach them because their homeschooling isn't working, and you've got a sick, elderly parent, and, so on and so forth. How do I convey that I may not be going through what you're going through, but I'm here to help you however I can? I just need you to tell me.
Exactly. And I think it's so important for leaders to ask that question. So something that I can relate to in terms of what you were sharing is that I have my own near-death experience where when I gave birth to my 3rd child, I've got 3, so my youngest, I went through some complications relating to the birth, and I was in critical condition for about 3 days and nearly lost my life. And for me, coming out of that, there was a great insight around work, actually, and what it means. Because I found that when I came out of that experience, my manager basically sent the secretary, I was working at the university at the time, so it was the head of department who was my boss, asked the secretary to come visit me, sent a bunch of flowers, and let them know when I can be back at work. And for me, that was such a moment of everything that I've given as a super achiever always gave over and above what was expected to my work. But as someone who had given so much, here I was in a moment of vulnerability and fragility even, really facing questions of life and death, and what does this all mean? And all I could get back was, when are you coming back to work? And it really made me reflect on what is work about and what is real leadership in terms of giving people what they need and giving the support. And for me, you don't always have to know the answers, but ask, how can I support you? So if we're taking the leadership lessons from this, for me, it would be have the leaders show empathy by understanding that I'm a whole human being. So I remember at the time feeling way more like a workhorse than a human being, and expecting them to just ask, what do you need from us right now? And that would have been really helpful. So I'd love to hear your perspective on that. What would you have wanted to see, or maybe you had a good experience? What did you see from your leadership at that time when you were going through? And I know you've had quite a few stories like this, but how would you say leadership can show up in this situation?
So it was government service in the FBI. So I had tiers of leadership, as you tend to do in the government. Everybody needs a job somewhere. Mm-hmm. And the individual who was my direct supervisor at the time, he didn't show up as a leader should show up. I mean, I think there were some forms that I needed to sign immediately afterwards because I was technically injured on the job. Okay. And so he came to my house and, brought like the world's saltiest food with him. And I'm like, you do realize my heart just stopped. So maybe we should just not have that go. And then it was, and that was pretty much it. It was all a functionary thing of like, oh, I hope you're good. And, tell Melissa to call us if she needs anything. And that was pretty much it. And then when I showed up back at work, he's like, oh, looks like things have been a little bit tough as far as getting back ready for work. And he's like, you're showing up a little bit soft here, physically soft here. And I'm like,
did he say that?
Mike, you do realize that I was, yes, he did say that. And I was like, Mike, you do realize that I was 3 months ago, I was dead, and I've been trying to not be dead for the, subsequent 3 months. And here I am at work, and I'm getting better every day. And then you go to the person who is about 3 levels above him, who is a tremendous human being. John was his name. And I went to go and see him one day, and he's like, hey, you've been through it. What do you need from us? And I said, well, I just need time. And I told him about this conversation where the guy said, that I came back soft. And he's like, you take your time. You'll come back hard when you're ready, whenever you need to. But whatever you need between now and then, you let me know. And that has created not just a professional admiration that I have for this man, but a genuine relationship that endures to this day now, 10 years afterwards. And I think it's probably a difference in the ability to empathize that these two men had, and one had it, one didn't. I think, John was significantly older than Mike at that time. Maybe it was just a life experience, but it's really simple to just tell somebody that you are with them, even if they are putting on a bravado, as I probably was, pretending that I was better off than I was. Doesn't matter. If somebody shows up and says, all right, boss, I'm ready to get back to work, great. You do what you want. You take your time. The work will be here. Figure out what you need, and then keep reiterating that message. That's all you can do, is just show people that you are engaged in their life. Exactly. When it comes to empathy, one of the things that I like to describe is getting in the boat with someone, because we are all in our own boats, and they are rowing, and sometimes we're rowing in the calmest of seas where it's smooth as glass, and other times in our life there are 30-foot waves that are just smashing over us, and we're not sure how we're going to survive. But you as a leader, you as a friend, you as another human being, you get in that boat. That is what empathy is. It's not standing on the shore saying, hey, keep rowing, you'll be fine.
Yeah.
It's getting in the boat and letting them know that you are there for the smoothest of seas and the roughest of seas, no matter what.
Yeah. I love that. And that's so important, because it's not exactly as you say. Sometimes it feels like some of the leaders really know how to get in that boat and help you along, help steer with you. And others, or row with you, or whatever it is, others are very good at standing on the shore and going, it's that way, keep going.
Yeah.
And for me, that was clearly the message that I got from my work. And I will actually add to that by saying that I came back knowing that I'm going to leave, that I'm going to resign. And had the approach been a bit different, they would have got a very engaged employee coming back. I came back to basically work back my maternity leave and then leave. And I knew that's what I was going to do. So it really does impact. Same.
It does. I mean, same thing. You try not to make it about yourself, but then I looked at it and I'm like, I got injured and I had something bad happen to me while I was voluntarily in a war zone for my fourth time now with this organization. And yet, you can't take the time to figure out, am I mentally right? Am I in a good place after this happened? The physical part, I can send you doctors' test results and lab results and physical results, and you can see that I'm getting better. But mentally, nobody ever once asked me, how are you ready to go mentally? And I think that was the same thing. That was the wake-up call for me. It took me 7 years after that to finally get out, but that started the trajectory of, this is not the right place for me.
Yeah, exactly. And amazing to see that if we bring it back to today and what we're dealing with, we are dealing with a lot of people who are experiencing loss due to COVID, experiencing people close to them who are in hospital, and they're dealing with their own emotional stresses around it. And it really is a time for leadership to step up into that empathy space and ask that question, what do you need from me? How can I support you in this? And to show that understanding and give time to people to really do what they need to do on a human level, even if it's not them that are sick, it's your family member. You still need time and you still need that support and empathy. So there's a lot of learning that I think leaders can do in this space today.
Yeah, it is. But I do think it comes down to that, there's kind of been this, I think there's been an awakening in leadership in the last, you've been in this space longer than I have, but I think there's been an awakening of that idea of this sort of servant leadership, but then also that there's no more need for machismo. There's no more need for like, oh, I get into the office at 6 a.m. and I leave at 10 p.m. and I'm the one who drives this. And I don't think that there's any need for that anymore. There's a need for humanizing who we are. And that idea of human capital, that your people are your most valuable asset that you have, has truly taken off. Now, there are a lot of people that are stuck in the old ways, and hopefully they will learn to change or they will get pushed aside, but they're still out there. I mean, they are very much still out there. And the way that I've done it through this is, we have staff that are all over the globe, quite literally all over the globe. And I think in 40 some odd different countries right now. And before, I used to be able to travel and to see them when I could, and to physically get to show that I cared and I wanted to be a part of what they were doing. And I was so very appreciative of what they're doing. But now it's resorted to emails and to phone calls and to Zoom sessions. And how do you get through that? Well, the way that I dealt with it, right or wrong, just my method is, I've shown my vulnerability, don't even want to put the word vulnerability, just show what I've been going through. Yes. And let them know that it's okay to go through it. It's okay you need to take a day off, take a day off. You got a contract to work, we'll figure this out, but take a day off, take the time. You're worried about things, voice it, because somebody else is going through the same thing. In this, since March so 10 months ago, my sister, who's a physician, had COVID, and it really knocked her down. So much so that at 3:00 in the morning, she was calling me just to talk because she just wanted somebody to know that she was struggling and that she was having a hard time, breathing and sleeping and doing all that. I think she just really wanted to have somebody who was on the phone with her in case something happened. About 3 weeks later, my mom died from COVID. She was in a nursing home, and, it took a handful of patients in her nursing home. And then fast forward, we have a birth of our son a few months later. So all these sort of highs and lows that have happened, I share them. I let people know what is going through my mind so that they can see that it's happening to somebody else. And I think that's the thing that really matters, is knowing that you are not alone in this. Your experience is not completely unique. Parts of it will be, because it's always going to be idiosyncratic to you as a person, but the general theme of what you're going through, somebody has been through it before, and you can either realize that there's somebody out there who can empathize with you, or there's somebody out there from whom you can learn.
Absolutely.
And that's the most important thing, I think.
Yeah. And I'm going to build on that as well by saying that sharing openly what you're going through is enough. It's not about providing answers. So sometimes I think people don't share what they're going through. Leaders don't share what they're going through because they feel like they have to be strong and hold up the fort in this moment. And sometimes also because they feel like they have to give solutions. And if you don't know what's going on, and if you're uncertain, you feel it's better not to say anything than to share anything if if it's not a good story, or if it doesn't have a good outcome or a happy ending, But that ability to communicate deeply, and I know you feel the same, it's that ability to communicate deeply that builds relationships, encourages people to come together and weather whatever challenge they're facing. So I think you said, communicating deeply can get almost anything done in this world. And I totally agree with you on that. It's that ability to just be open.
Yeah. I do think if we as I'm not trying to solve the world's problems right here at all, but I do think that if people on a very personal level could figure out how to empathize better and how to communicate better, then we would all be in a much, much better place. Because you look at how polarized parts of the world are, how polarized people are over COVID itself. Let's just have a conversation about it. Let's figure out, where do you stand on it? Where do I stand on it? And let's find that intersectional point that we can both agree on, and then move forward from there. Yeah.
Communication and hearing, being able to hear also other points of view. So kind of bringing people into your world. And so I'm going to change tack a little bit, but I am curious, just because people also ask me this, but did you have a near-death experience at all? Were you aware that you were dying or anything like that in your experience?
Yeah, I didn't. It was a big dark tunnel. There's no light at the end of the tunnel or anything like that. It was just, I was out. I was completely out. And, you know, it's funny now because I have a hard time discerning between what people have told me happened and what I may have experienced. But the experience is actually that I've had at this point of being a patient, laying down and having people over you, working on you, and seeing somebody's face looking down at you, or seeing, the worst part for me was actually these guys had put in what's called a nasogastric tube, and it's the big tube that goes down your nose and it goes like a meter into your stomach. And so when I woke up, one of the parts that I was kind of sort of lucid for was them pulling it out. And it was horrible because it must have been right when they started it. And it was like, there's all this tubing coming out. Anyways,
yeah,
that was the first sort of thing that I remember. And it was just that snapshot. And then 2 days flew by. And I don't think that I had anything that sort of, was an epiphanal moment or a divine moment or anything like that. And I'm actually kind of grateful for that, because what it made me realize, and this is not putting aside people's belief systems or anything like that, because I have my own and ascribe to them, but that concept of memento mori, of remembering that you are going to die. The Stoics practiced it. Marcus Aurelius, he expounded upon that in his meditations. But the idea of remembering every single day that you are going to die and coming to peace with that, so that you live the best possible life that you can live, or so that you at least, when you're trying to make that choice between taking your dog for a walk or sitting on the couch or, playing with your kids for 5 more minutes, you make that choice. You make that choice of, I know that tomorrow could be my last day on earth. Today could be my last day on earth. So try and live like it. And that's not saying that, you need to drop everything and travel the world and heal the blind and do everything like that. But you truly should try and take that extra moment to live your life the way that you would want written down if somebody wrote the story of your life. So that's why I'm actually kind of grateful that, 1 minute I was alive, the next minute I was dead, and I lucked out in that I was alive again.
Yeah.
There's nothing in between there.
Yeah. And again, I can relate to what you're saying in terms of just having that awareness of what it means to nearly have died, right? To have been dead and then alive. And I think for me, it's also generated exactly what you're saying, a heightened awareness of making every day count. But also for me, definitely, I'm not fearful of death anymore. It actually is okay. I know that it happens, kind of thing, and it's going to happen. And I just don't have any fear around that. So that's definitely something that I noticed after my experience. But perhaps let's move off this very intense topic and into something a little bit lighter. And we're coming to the end of our time, but maybe I've got some questions that I'm going to end with. But before I go into my series of quick questions for you, maybe just share with us, what is a great leadership lesson or something that you want to bring into this conversation that we haven't mentioned before and that you really would like to say and bring into our space?
Yeah, the biggest thing for me that has come about, I think through time, through age, through experience, is the idea of introspection and self-reflection. And that is something that is really difficult to do, particularly if you are in a position or an industry where you may have done the same thing. And it's very easy for leaders to become stagnant in their leadership and to do the same thing over and over again, especially if you've been doing it for 10 years, 20 years, whatever it may be, even if you've been doing it for a couple of years. I've had the privilege of having a somewhat different background, of moving from a very extreme position in the military to a equally extreme but slightly more individualistic position in the FBI, and then into consulting and now into working in the business that I'm in now, each one of those things has built upon the experiences I've had in each one of those positions has built upon one another. But I didn't realize that necessarily until I got out and I did consulting. And I had a bit of the imposter syndrome that came about where I had these very specific business problems that were being discussed, and I was expected to contribute and to, prove my value in these. And for a moment there, I had a bit of a nail bite where I was like, I don't know, because I've never experienced that. But then there was something that resonated with me that I had experienced actually when I was in the military. And then it was sort of compounded by some experiences that I had in the FBI, where I then thought, okay, this problem that I'm being asked right now is not exactly the same, but it's very similar to what I have experienced in the past. So let me take that framework, that decision-making framework, and place it upon what I'm working on now. And I've got 80% of the solution there. Now I can figure out that 20%. And so I've realized that all of those experiences that lead you up to the point that you are at right now, you have decision-making frameworks. You have those experiences that you can hearken back to, and they can help you create your solution to these next problems. But the only way that that really comes about, particularly if you're not moving industries all the time, is by taking the time to reflect. And there's countless methods for it. If it's having just a quiet moment of meditation at the end of the day, if it's journaling, if it's, actually looking at your performance reviews and trying to figure out, what you can take from there. And I know you've talked extensively about how to give a good performance review. So all those things, you just need to take the time to realize, what have I learned today? What have I learned in this position? And how do those influence what I'm going forward to? Because you might not need them right now, but there will be something that arises in your future where you want to be able to look back at, what did I do in the past? Did it work? Did it not work? And what would I do now based on that? So reflection, introspection, I think those are critical things that, anybody who is in a leadership position, or even if you're not, it's just something we need to do in our lives, because without that, we're missing out. They say that people learn best from history. History proves the future, all those things. Same goes for us. Our history is what is going to make us succeed or fail in the future.
Mm. And there's so much to what you're saying, because there's the time to reflect. So it's actually stepping out of your day-to-day environment and busyness and the stuff that just comes naturally and automatically and you know how to do. Taking time to step out of that and really think about it and reflect on that. I think that's such an important skill, as well as looking back at your past experiences and reflecting on those. But in addition to that, there's also trusting yourself, trusting your experience, your wisdom, your knowledge, and everything that makes up who you are. So sometimes I think we put a certain label on ourselves, whether it's, I used to be an actuary, or you used to be an FBI agent, or whatever it is, and we kind of rely on this label to give us all the knowledge that we need. But it's actually so much more than that. It's our knowledge, it's our experience, it's who we are, it's our personality, it's everything that has brought us to this place, that if we just stand in that for a moment and trust it, to say, I have everything that I need in order to apply that to the situation that I'm in now. And then it will come to you. It's not about knowing the answer or having the solution because you've learned it. It's actually about opening up to everything that you are.
Couldn't have said it better myself. You nailed it right there.
Thank you. So a couple of quick questions for fun.
Sure.
What is your worst habit?
Oh. All right.
I was debating in my mind for a second there. Do I go best or worst first? So I'm going to ask you both. You can decide which one you want to start with.
All right. Well, I would say that my absolute worst habit that I have right now is letting events overtake me. So letting that stress overtake me. That is truly my worst habit right now, because I, like you, have 3 kids, ranging in age from 4 months to 8 years. We've got their schooling that we need to make sure that we get taken care of. My wife is also working. My wife just had, her ACL replaced, so she was bedbound for a couple of weeks, and, all these things happening. And I find if I don't take the time for me to wind my stress down, if that's going for a walk, if that's working out, if that's meditation, whatever that is, if I don't do that, then it's not me that suffers. It is me in a way, but it's also, I'll find myself yelling at my kids for doing something stupid. Well, they're kids and they do stupid stuff. It's in their DNA. So why am I letting my stress bleed over onto them? So my worst habit is not owning my stress and figuring out how to wind that down, or, you're never going to eliminate all of it, but how to put that by the wayside so that I can live that life that I want to live with my family. It's a worst habit right there. That, and that's definitely my worst habit. And
curious, what was that going to be? That end?
I don't leave the toilet seat up. We're good with that. So sometimes I do leave a dirty dish in the sink every once in a while.
Oh, terrible.
I know.
Okay, best habit.
Best habit is I am consistent with waking up every single morning before everybody else does, and working out, doing something physically active. I do it every single day, and it is long before everybody else in the house gets up. And I do that just because it is so important to me to get that time for myself mentally, so that I can be the best person I can possibly be for the rest of the day. So that's my best habit, is consistency.
Awesome. So I don't know if you know, Killian, but I have just written my book on weekly habits for extraordinary leaders. And with it comes a gift. So I'm going to open it up. You are welcome to go and download this, and our listeners as well. There's a habit tracker. So take those good habits and take the bad habits as well. Turn them into, so like you said, allowing stress to overwhelm you. What is a habit that could help you remember that and not do that? So there's a habit tracker available for free download at daphnahorovitz.com/habit-tracker. Go ahead and check it out. And then you answered my second question, which was going to be about the morning or night person. Are you a morning or a night person? You definitely sound like a morning person to me.
I am a morning person. I mean, like, now with a young kid who still is not sleeping through the night, unfortunately, I find myself as a bit of a night person as well. But my normal routine is if I see 10 o'clock at night, I know something's gone horribly wrong.
Oh my gosh.
So I'm in bed before that, but then I'm up at about 4:20, 4:30 in the morning.
Wow.
To let my dogs out, and then to start my day, because my older kids decide that they want to be up every single morning at 6:30. So if I'm not done with my stuff by then, it's just not going to happen.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. And for me, if I manage to get into bed before midnight, I consider that a real achievement. So
that's impressive.
Complete opposite.
Yeah.
Final question for today is, what book are you reading now? Are you a reader or are you listening?
Yeah, no, I am. So I listen and I read. I do one of each at the same time. Listen on my walks or when I'm driving. And I'm listening to a book called Summer Moon, which is all about the Comanche tribe in Southwest United States, and it's a bit about Western expansion of the white settlers and their interaction with the Comanches and how the Comanches do. But it's absolutely fascinating. And then the reading that I'm doing is I don't have a copy here with me, but I'm rereading a book by Rolf DeBelly called The Art of Thinking Clearly. Mm-hmm. And if you've never seen it, he's got two, at least I know of, The Art of Thinking Clearly and then The Art of the Good Life. And they are like 2 or 3 page little chapters that talk about different principles. So The Art of Thinking Clearly will go through, what is confirmation bias? And then it'll give some really good exemplars of that. And then the art of the good life is just little things that you can do to be appreciative of life a little bit more. So I recommend those to everybody. I give them out as gifts all the time, and I find myself sort of rereading those as often as I can.
Well, that's awesome. I haven't heard of it, and I'm definitely going to look it up. I'm a big reader myself, and we'll put those in the show notes as well for people to have a look at. And Killian, thank you so much. I've really enjoyed our conversation. I think
Me too.
went into some real depth there and got some great nuggets about leadership and what lessons can be learned. Before we say goodbye, how can people get hold of you if you just want to give a little bit on that? And we'll add that into our show notes as well. So
sure.
We'll be
So unfortunately, I was a bit of a Luddite coming out of government service when it comes to social media, but I'm on LinkedIn as just Killian Hemmy. And I have a Facebook page, which is really not built out too much, but that's just my name. And the other thing that I am doing is, I started a series of interviews with some people who are pretty amazing, who have been through some incredible things. And it's going to be, eventually, it'll be a book and a series of podcasts on resilience, reflections on resilience. So I do have a kind of landing page website, reflectionsonresilience.com. If people are, and I've got some of the people's stories up there, if people want to look and see, and they have stories of their own and they want to submit, I would be happy for that. So
awesome.
It's an in-process thing. It's a bit of a labor of love right now, but it's I think there will be some great stories for people to hopefully learn from, or at least, going back to our point, see that your experience is unique to you, but it's not unique to the world.
Yeah. And there's a lot to be learned from that. It's so true. I love what you've said about resilience is something that you learn through experience. And maybe some people's experience is so huge that not everybody has that kind of a story, but I do believe everybody has an opportunity to experience something that will build their resilience. And it really is an important point there that our experiences, our challenges are really helping us to build that resilience, build that capacity for empathy and leadership and all of the things that we've spoken about today. So,
absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you, Killian. It was an awesome conversation.
It was. Thanks so much. And this is an incredible podcast, incredible books, and just I'm very appreciative of what you're doing to help people grow into the leaders that they absolutely can be. It's not something that's bestowed upon you. It's not something that you were born with. Leadership is a learned art.
Yeah. This wraps up another episode of Leadership Live. Thank you for joining us today. And now let's continue the conversation. Do you have any questions, comments, or suggestions? Connect with me on LinkedIn or head on to my website at daphnahorovitz.com, where you can download a free sample of my new book, Weekly Habits for Extraordinary Leaders. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to share it with a friend so that I can continue to reach and support leaders just like you. So tune in next week to Leadership Live, where talented people become extraordinary leaders.